morning and welcome to our live talk program. This is Lloyd Grubb here, your host on Revive Reform Radio, doing our live talk program covering current events. And this morning, our topic is national debt, multiple contributing factors. So I want to look at the broad discussion of national debt. And many people are talking about this most naturally because the national debt just rose. So I want to jump in here and talk about this event here. So welcome again to our live talk program. Hopefully you had a blessed night rest and ready to take on the challenges of this day, and including the ones of death. Let us pray. Our Father, who art in heaven, I thank you again for the blessings of your word and the guidance, dear Lord, that you give to us. I pray, Lord, that you may continue to be our guide in all things, and as we make various personal financial decision and watch what's going on in the nation. May you bless us, we pray, for Christ's sake. Amen. So I'm looking here at this topic, national debt, multiple contributing factors. All right, so I want to talk about some of the various different contributing factors. And if you've been paying attention to this discussion, normally the discussion goes from the left to the right: conservative, liberal, and Republican, Democrat. But I just want to talk about it from the point of view of what's going on, and not really who's causing it per se, because when you study out what's going on and if one is honest, one realizes real quickly both sides are spending. And so it's like normally in families it goes something like this. There's somebody would say the females spend a lot of money because she go out and shop probably more regular and buy smaller items, clothing, so forth, for the most part, unless she's into jewelry. And then so the other person would say, yeah, but the guy will go out there and buy a big ticket item and run up some serious debt. So it depends on where you're coming from. Each person can accuse the other person, but when you start looking at it, you realize real quickly both sides are spending. So we want to look at the national debt and look at some of the contributing factors, and hopefully I can talk a little bit about this issue where many people always talk about this idea of being on the gold standard. If we were still on the gold standard, things would not be the way it is. So I want to talk about that a little bit. There's a whole discussion in itself. So I'm going to start off here by reading one text to you, and then I'm going to go to the 3 articles and then some more Bible passages and some discussion along the way. So in Isaiah chapter 55 verse 1 and 2, Isaiah 55 verse 1 and 2, it says, everyone that thirsteth, come ye to the waters, and he that hath no money, come ye, buy and eat. Yea, come, buy wine and milk without money, without price. Wherefore do you spend money for that which is not bread, and you labor for that which satisfieth not? Hearken diligently unto me, and heed ye that which is good, and let your soul delight itself in fatness. So here the Bible described, Isaiah described that the people are buying stuff, they're eating stuff, but it's not what satisfies. And that's the problem with life in general. A lot of our spending can be in stuff that really doesn't satisfy, stuff that really doesn't fill us up, stuff that really we're wasting money on. And that is indicative of the fall, or that was basically what was happening in the fall of Israel. And as I say, we study Israel to get a very clear picture of what other nations go through. It's just Israel history is a thorough history written down by the Bible thousands of years. So you can really understand what's the internal mechanism that's happening. And obviously here what's happening, which is why we're having a national debt, and why you and I, when we have personal debts, what's happening? It's not so much that we're spending money, but it's what we're spending money on. And that's basically, to me, what what an issue about the national debt. Because if you're spending money on what is bread, what he says, and you're satisfied, the debt is not going to be so much of a problem, or the spending is not going to be so much of a problem. So many people say what we have a problem with is that we have spending. But then other people say, well, we're taking in a lot of money. The country takes in, I think, over $3 trillion, if I get that right. So you're making money, you're having money coming in. Money is not the issue, or gold is not the issue. The issue is that you're spending, but what are you spending it on? And if you're spending on what is not bread and what will not satisfy you, then you have a problem because you're spending foolishly. And that becomes the issue. It's like there's many times you've seen stories with individuals now, and they say they rack up a whole bunch of debt. And you look around and you say, where's the debt? I don't see it. Because you look at their furniture, you look at their car, you look at their house, you look at everything, and they have nothing to show for it. I'm sure, I'm almost going to say raise your hand if you've ever seen this. The person said, yeah, I've made this amount of money every year, and I spend this certain amount of money every year, and in the last 20 years, this is the amount of money I spend. And you look around and you say, where is the money? So you're buying stuff, but the stuff they're buying is there's no value there. And so as the years roll by, you're accumulating stuff, but it's nothing. It's a lot of knick-knack. There's people like going to yard sales. There's people like buying cocaine. There's people like buying, fast food. And when you look at it, after all the money has been spent on food, their body looks and feel like junk. So it's just junk food. That's what they call it anyhow, obviously. So you're buying what is not bread. Literally, it's not bread. Then you spend money on, as I say, cocaine and crack and all these things. Well, it's not really happiness, and it's not a high life. It's basically a vapid life. It evaporates. So the spending is happening, but there's nothing to show for it. And so when you spend and you have something to show for it, if you run into a problem, you can always go sell those assets off. But if it's assets that has no value and no practical use, well, hey, where's all the money went? So that's to me is indicative. So what I'm going to go over, you'll see as I demonstrate via the Bible text passages and via some more articles in the next few minutes, that this issue of the national debt, whether it be on a personal basis or on a national basis, that the problem is you could be spending a lot of money on stuff that has no value. It is just junk. And the end result is that you're just, as the Bible says, your labor, but it's not, going to be satisfied with your labor. You have income, but the income is being junked on alcohol and drugs and all these things. And you will end up broke. Like many people, you go on the street, you see somebody on the bridge. And the simple answer for that is that it's not that they never made money or they never worked in their life. It's just that they spend the money on what is not bread. And they spend the money on what will not satisfy them. It will only ruin their lives. And they end up in that place. You say, man, what did you do with all your resources? I burned it on stuff. I smoked it. Smoke it all day long. It went up in flames up my mouth. So the first article here, short article, national debt tops $22 trillion for the first time as expert warn of ripple effects. And it's written by Michael Collins over there at USA Today. So the national debt surpassed $22 trillion for the first time on Tuesday, a milestone that experts warn is further proof the country is in an unsustainable financial path that could jeopardize the economy, security of every American. The Treasury Department reported that the debt hit $22.01 trillion, a jump of more than $30 billion in just this month. The national debt has been rising at a faster rate following the passage of President Donald Trump's $1.5 trillion tax cut a little more than a year ago as a result of the congressional efforts to increase spending on domestic and military programs. The nation has added more than $1 trillion in debt in the last 11 months alone. And so I just pause there a little bit just to note there that there's a certain point with anything that it start to speed up. And when things start to speed up and speed out of control, the rate that the exponential rate or growth that will happen can be unbelievable. It's like you're driving your car and you're going 65 miles per hour. Something happened. You have a trouble to react, but you can react to a certain degree. Now, going 120 miles per hour, your reaction time, just based upon speed, is going to be highly challenged, especially if you're not a race car driver. And when you start to go 150 and stuff like that, anything happen, it just takes one thing to happen, and you're just a pile of rubble that they're gonna sweep up off the floor. And that's where the problem is when things you start to add $1 trillion in 11 months. $1 trillion in 11 months. So notice here, reaching this unfortunate milestone so rapidly is the latest sign that our fiscal situation is not only unsustainable but accelerating, says Michael A. Peterson, Chief Executive Officer of the Peter G. Peterson Foundation, a nonpartisan organization working to address the country's long-term fiscal challenges. For Americans, the growing debt should be a concern, expert says, because over time it can push up interest rates to consumers and businesses. The higher rates can ripple through the economy, nudging up rates for mortgages, corporate bonds, and other types of consumer and business loans. A big national debt can also make it harder for the government to increase spending to combat the next recession or devote more money to retraining workers and helping the poor, among other programs. Peterson attributed the growing national debt to the structural mismatch between spending and revenue. The biggest drivers are the aging population, high healthcare costs, and growing interest payment, combined with tax codes that fail to generate sufficient revenue, he said. The debt eclipsing 22 trillion is another sad reminder of the inexcusable tab our nation leaders continue to run up and will leave the next generation with, said Judge Greg and Edward Rendell of the co-chair of the nonpartisan campaign to fix the debt project. With deficit rising and gross debt scheduling to jump more than 1 trillion annually, Congress must take action to put the country on a more sustainable path. Their fiscal recklessness over the past years has been shocking, with few willing to step up with a real plan. We need responsible leadership to fix the debt, not a worsening of partisanship. So, in other words, there is a big problem, and so if you have a big problem, it doesn't matter what's you're going on. Well, technically, this is how I say it. I say it in the sense of a family, where you have a wife and a husband, and there's a child involved, and there's something going wrong with the child. You would think the parents would be able to put aside their differences, even if they're divorced, and say, you know what, we're going to try to do what's right for the child. The problem is, with many marriages and even divorces, people who are divorcees, they can't put aside their petty difference or their serious differences and to address the issues with the child so they can do what's best for the child, because they're in so much selfishness that they just can't, they're blind to this. So this is where we see with the government and what's going on. It's a lot of partisanship, a lot of blaming, like conservative and the liberals, they blame each other. But either one that goes into power, at least for the last few cycles, the spending does not stop. It's just the spending focus changes. That's all. But it's still spending. So let me cover some of this here with you before I go to my next two articles. So when you think about it, he make a list here and he says these are some of the things that are driving, right? The debt. And he says some of the biggest drivers, so we have to deal with this, is the aging population. Now, when I talk about spending on what is not bread, technically the aging population had paid into the system. There's a certain point where people are paying into Social Security, Medicaid, Medicare, they're paying into government. And so you pay in and then you draw out. Some people say it's a Ponzi scheme. But which either way, you pay and you draw out. But as we know, many of these systems that were put in place, Social Security, Medicaid, Medicare, so forth, that were for the aging population, are running debt because some of the money was used up in ways it wasn't shouldn't, and some of the money was not properly appropriated to make sure that when you had this large population of baby boomers, they would be able to be taken care of, and especially because they're living longer, but they're much sicker because they didn't take care of their bodies primarily, and because of just the result of aging. You age, you get sick, and you're expensive to take care of. So think about that then. So here's the aging population. The money was not properly appropriated, taken care of, put aside. And that's what the country did. But when you think about it from on a personal basis, when they say so many people over 60 doesn't have any liquid cash or no cash, not even $1,000 in the bank, and they're heading to retirement, and it's dire, they're in dire situation. So just how a large population of the country personally handled their gray years, the years when they're getting older. So also the government handled the money that was supposed to be for the group. In other words, it's a problem, a mindset problem. And this is part of what I'm talking about, where you're making the money today and all you're thinking about is today. So you live on all the money you make. You're not thinking, wait a minute, I'm getting older and I will not be able to work the way I'm supposed to work. So this is a big problem happening. As I say, one of the bigger drivers is the healthcare, because the society in general is very sick, and the older one get is the sicker the society is. Another thing also, as I say, high healthcare costs. This is an obvious issue, big driver in the last few years. Growing interest payments. When we talk about even interest payments, when you think about it, that some brands of cars that people drive on a regular basis are people don't buy them, they lease them. So we're not even talking about they'll never get to a point of ownership because they're driving brand new cars, but it's a brand new lease. So no investment in tomorrow. All it is just what look good for today, what's convenient for today, and they put off for a later date what they're gonna have to deal with. But the problem is, as they get older, your opportunity to make money decreases, and there's no assets. And this is what I'm talking about: buying what is not bread, because there's no asset. Because one thing to say, there's a national debt because people are borrowing to buy things that are of value. But when you're borrowing and you're borrowing to buy nothing because it's a lease, when the lease is over, you still don't have a car. And this is something that is, I find more and more people who are older doing, which is very weird that you think you do that type of thing when you're younger. So, and then tax code that fail to generate sufficient revenue. That's an issue in itself. So let's look at some of this thing. What has happened in the last few years of our lives? Well, after the war is one of the things that I'm going to cover that is a big problem when it comes on to the national debt. We are in a constant state of war, multiple wars and multiple proxy war. So not only America is fighting wars directly, where our troops and so forth are involved in the war, but also we're having a situation where we're having proxy war. One of the wars I'm going to mention very quickly is Yemen. I have an article on that. So we're fighting a war in Yemen, right there off the Horn of Africa to the east of Africa. We're fighting a war over there, but it's not we're not fighting the war. It's a proxy war. We're back in Saudi Arabia in that war, and the local people that Saudi Arabians have aligned themselves with. So we're fighting a war against Iran in Yemen. Plus, we're fighting a war in Iraq. That war never stopped. Most people think it stopped. It never stopped. We're fighting a war in Syria, but that's more proxy war. We're fighting a direct war in Afghanistan. That's been the longest war in American history. So that war in Afghanistan and the war in Iraq was started under President Bush Jr. And that war was a war that ended up in one of the reasons that ended up bringing us to the financial collapse, because you're spending, and the spending was one problem, and then you have an inflation where the housing market was just out of control, and there was a lot of illegality that went on, that caused a housing markets bubble that ended up bursting. So what happened after that financial collapse? And they had various different bailout, bailout for clunkers and all kind of stuff like that. That would just give away for the corporate type. So you're giving away money to the corporate people. The people are too big to fail. You're having a wars. You're having expenses when it come on to all the expenses come on to social programs, which account, I think, for 10% of the gross domestic product or something like that. So you're having all this thing going on, and then here comes a financial crash. You're bringing a new president. The old president and the new president, they came out with this idea to bail out the too big to fail companies, and you give all these multi-billionaires that basically ransack their businesses and the economy, and you bail that out and you say, let's close down or bring down some of these wars, limit some of these wars, and then more spending, and then they try to fix the health care and all kind of stuff happened. They try to do the what you call it, the money to go to the solar panel companies and all these companies, and then that was a failure. Solyndra and all these things with the solar panel, the renewable energy thing, that didn't work out. And so more money down the tube, more money wasted. Then we come now to our new president, President Donald Trump. He comes in now and he says, before there's a financial crash, I'm just going to go in. First thing they're going to do with all the powers they have is they're going to bail out the rich people again. So they take a tax cut and they basically says, here's some free money to multi-billionaires. And now we have a second bailout. But we wouldn't call it a bailout because technically it wasn't a bailout. It was just basically a handout. So the rich again in our society got another bailout again. So they're getting bailouts after bailouts. They got bailouts with cash for clunkers. They got bailouts with tax credit for buying gas guzzlers. They got bailout with wars. So the military industrial complex can make money like Raytheon, I think it's called, and Lockheed Martin, all these companies. So they constantly getting bailout. They constantly getting free money of the taxpayers. What's happening? Why this is happening? Every single one of those programs added to the national debt. And that's one issue. So constantly bailout for the rich. And what happened? Even though there's an increase, there was a bump, I think 2018, in the amount of revenue. But the spending is out of control because what we're doing. Then we have multiple multi-million dollar, I should say, frauds against the government for taxes and so forth, and for healthcare and all that. That's another thing. All right. Another thing that we have, again, that is mentioned in the article that I just read, is the sick and aging population. The population before was into your meat, no exercise, so forth and so on. And they're very sick, and the cost of healthcare is, astronomical. And there's people who are high rollers. That means they frequently always in the hospital. Then we have this society that seems to be depressed and suicidal. They're always seeking entertainment and always seeking a rush. And this part of the society is spending every single money they can get their hand on for drugs and for high octane lifestyle. Always want to be on a rush, hurting themselves, maiming themselves. And this is falling off the side of cliffs, taking pictures while drunk. And this is not a big part of the hit that's going on that is not being spoken about. Because if you checked out some of the State of the Union address, you would realize very quickly the opiate crisis was never mentioned. The national debt was never really talked about. No plan on the table by no side, whether it be Republicans or Democrats, as to what we're going to do about this. But these things are eating away at the society because you're spending money on what's not bread. When a person do a line of cocaine, they get high, but all that money is gone. When a person smoke a sting of weed, that money is not an investment in their future. That money is it just goes up in smoke. And somebody say, well, wealth is never. Or they say wealth is you can never destroy wealth. It's always transferred. Ain't no transfer. I don't believe that. That thing you just smoke it. There's no value that was added to the person. And the people getting the money, they too gonna go easy come, easy go. They're gonna lose it. So this is another part of the thing that's reaping havoc. Also, you find that a lot of people are spending on food, but a lot of the food that people eat is basically it's synonymous of their lifestyle. It's an empty calorie lifestyle. It's an empty calorie diet. So you're eating, but you've really eaten this food. So somebody buy a burger, it's GMO tomato in the burger if they do eat tomato. It's lettuce that is basically some white leaf lettuce. We call it not romaine, but whatever it is, iceberg lettuce. It's a burger patty that's made from a cow that's been fed even cardboard, literally. If you know what I'm talking about. And they've if you study this thing out, and it's been fed some of the weirdest GMO foods and brought up in a factory farm. And then you have a bun that is just made from white flour. And you look at a person eating that food with all that empty calories. And they're huge, but they have bone density problem. They have all kind of irritable bowel syndrome, chronic fatigue, mental health problem, all kind of problem from that weird food. And so you're spending on what is not bread. That's not going to bring back any results. The results is more pain and destruction. The continuous wars, to me, again, is like an empty calorie lifestyle. People love MMA, boxing, but they also love war. And all these wars, they're not bringing back the resources that is promised. All this is doing is just basically increasing the debt. And it is running up the debt in a terrible way and bringing back maimed and destroyed young men who has to be cared for and work with for the rest of their life because they have mental health problem. And this is what's happening. And so there's people out there who will look at everything I said and more that could be said about what's really driving up the debt. And they'll say, well, Lloyd, but if we could go on the gold standard, this will fix that problem. Now, how is it going to fix the problem? If I give you, a pound of gold, 16 ounces, and that's probably $16,000 or more. I can't remember what the ounce of gold is. And I give you that money, and now we're on the gold standard. And if you take that gold and you use that gold to do war, to buy empty calorie food, to take drugs, to be high, and you're constantly sick, and you're being stolen from because people are defrauding you, and you're giving away your money to people that's rich, how long before you're broke? Not long. No matter what standard you're on. Whether you printed money or you're digging up out of the ground, whatever standard you're on, the bigger problem is that the lifestyle and the behavior is going to make you be broke. It doesn't matter if a person is a multi-billionaire, multi-millionaire. If his lifestyle is exactly what I just described, and he's going to be broke, it's just going to mean if he's a multi-millionaire, he's going to go broke faster than if he's a multi-billionaire. But he will go broke. It's just a matter of time. And if not broke, he'll be dead before he go broke. Because either the drug going to get him, the sickness going to get him, the empty calorie food's going to get him because he's going to probably get a food poisoning from all these weird foods. The war is going to get him. Something's going to get him. And that's where the problem, we talk about the national debt and its multiple contributing factors. Most people want to talk about things like gold standard and stuff like that, like they're lost their mind. If you constantly have a constant threat of war, war is always being considered a new wars. They're always talking about, let's go attack Venezuela, let's go attack Iran, let's do more attacks on other countries. And you constantly have this threat of war. That's what's going to drive up the debt because you're spending on things that you don't know the outcome going to be. And so far, all the wars recently have been bad outcomes financially. I'm not talking about the lives. So when, as Isaiah said, you're eating what is not bread, You're buying stuff that is not going to satisfy you. That's what will cause debt. And I don't care who you are, from a personal basis or a national basis. If you're an individual that you're depressed and you like to take drugs, you will be broke. You'll be spending everything you have and then you sell everything you have and get rid of because you're just spending money on what is not bread. That's just the reality. So I'm going to read two quick articles here just to illustrate the point. The first one here is about the war in Yemen. Just a quick mention, something going on with the war. And this is again taken from USA Today. It says, in rebuke to President Trump, House approved measure to force U.S. withdrawal from Yemen. This is written by Deidre Shesh Green. The White House easily approved a measure Wednesday that would force the Trump administration to end its military support for the Saudi-led war in Yemen. The vote was a sharp rebuke to Saudi Arabia for its conduct in the conflict and pushback against the Trump administration's close ties to the kingdom. The 248 to 177 vote also serve as a stinging condemnation for the Saudi government role in the murder of Jamal Khashoggi and highlighted the growing appetite in Congress for reasserting itself in foreign policy. So my pause there. So it seems like I don't know if my number is right, but it seems like at least probably 20 Republicans voted for this measure. It's historic, says Representative Ro Khanna, a California Democrat who authored the measure, which invoked Congress authority under the 1973 War Powers Act. He noted that Congress has never before approved a resolution using that Vietnam-era law, which was designated to limit the president's power to start and escalate military engagement. It shows that the gravity of what's going on in Yemen, that the first time we're doing this is against Saudi's brutal bombing campaign in one of the world's greatest humanitarian catastrophes. Republican opponents of the Yemen resolution said it would give Iran a green light to spread its influence in Yemen and set a dangerous precedent by stretching the war powers definition of military engagement. GOP lawmakers noted that the Trump administration early halted its refueling of Saudi jets last fall. They argued that the U.S. role now, which involves providing logistics, intelligence, and targeting assistance, did not amount to using American forces, right? So they're saying basically all that does not amount to much. The U.S. armed forces are not engaged in hostility in Yemen. Representative Michael McCall, the top Republican in the House Foreign Affairs Committee, he said that the measure is aimed at removing troops that simply are not there. McCall and others argued also that ending American targeting assistance to Saudi Arabia would only worsen civilian casualties, right? It does not address the humanitarian catastrophe inside of Yemen and completely ignore the destabilizing role that Iran is playing. The war in Yemen is a proxy battle between Saudi Arabia and Iran as the two regimes battle for influence in the region. The Saudis, along with the United Arab Emirates, are engaged in a brutal conflict against the Iranian-backed Houthi rebels. The war has exacted a horrific toll on the Yemeni people, with more than 50,000 civilians killed and millions on the brink of starvation. House Foreign Affairs Chief Eliot Engel, a Democrat from New York, said there has been 18,000 air strikes, one-third of them hitting non-military targets. Starving children, millions of displaced, outbreaks of deadly disease, Engel said during Wednesday's House floor debate. He agrees with GOP opponents that countering Iran influence in Yemen was important, but said it did not merit support of a reckless Saudi United Arab Emirates bombing campaign. We cannot just give the coalition blank check when so many lives are being lost. Although most House Republicans voted against the measure, the GOP successfully amended it to include language that states that it is in Americans' national security interest to combat anti-Semitism around the world. The GOP provision comes on the heel of a tweet posted by Republican Anwar Omar that many denounce as anti-Semitic. The resolution will now go to the Senate, which passed similar measures the last Congress, and where proponents are confident of success again. And I'll cut there that article. So I want to take two things out of this article very briefly. Just I want to cut and run. You can read the rest of the article there, as I mentioned. It's about Yemen resolution. So the GOP noted that Trump administration already halted its refueling of solid jets last fall. So basically, this is why it is a war that is being propped up. It's a proxy war being supported by Americans. So they were helping refueling the jets that were doing these bombing campaigns. So they're helping these 18,000 bombing campaign. If you watch, I've been watching this war, whatever news I can get out of this war, and it's phenomenal. The place before the war was really poor place, dry and poor, and they have bombed it, as they say, to the 6th century. That's what they always say. They want to bomb all Muslim countries to the 6th century. Well, I guess they have done this in this country. It is being wrecked, and so there's all kind of humanitarian crisis going on. It's unreal. And I remember watching this video. They were showing where the people on the ground will pick up like the shell casing of the bombs, and they would say "Made in America." So when they say, and so you can go online, you can see that. You can go on YouTube and search for that. You can see that it's not just they're refueling the planes, but all this armament is built in America, is supporting American workers. It's part of the gross domestic product. So all these bombs, so 18,000 bombs, so that's why they're supporting it, because it's not just a bombing campaign, it's actually a money-making scheme. So these bombs they have stamped on the side of them, "Made in America." The planes that are being flown are made in America. The fueling is from America. America has now become the number one producer of energy, petroleum, natural gas, number one in the world. So you're refueling with American fuel. You're using American planes to refuel, American aircraft carriers to refuel. You're using American planes to do the bombings. The bombs are made in America. The flyers of the plane, the person who's pulling the trigger and fighting the war, it is for real. Saw this. But remember, as I say, out of the alleged 19 attackers, since none of them live, so you can verify to a certain degree, but the attackers, they claim that from the 9/11 were almost all from Saudi Arabia. So that's fascinating. So when you look at that, it's that the U.S., because you're reading this thing here, says they argued the U.S., that the U.S. role now, which involves providing logistics, intelligence, and targeting assistance. So here's the thing. So it's providing logistics. So that means if I need to get this person from here to here, I'll be the logistics person. If I need to get food, if I need to get supplies, America does good logistics, right? So it's basically logistics is basically operating warehouses and moving large shipment of stuff. So you see, it's there's military from Saudi Arabia again, but the logistics is coming from America. So when you look at it, the only thing that's really missing, so even though the Republicans say, we don't have troops on the ground. Well, we don't have them on the ground, but we have them on the aircraft carriers. We have them based in other countries, military base from other countries. We're fighting this war. If you look at it, the number, you gotta be crazy, unless I'm crazy. This is America. America is fighting a war in Iraq, in Yemen. So we're not just fighting a war in Afghanistan. We're fighting a war in Syria. We're fighting a war in Yemen. We're fighting, and then we seem to want to start a war with Iran, and we want to start one in Venezuela. So, but somebody said, well, we're going to be profitable. Isn't it so that we're going to be profitable? These wars have not been proven to be profit. See, the main idea of war is that you're basically either defending yourself, which is morally justified, or you're doing a war for financial gain, which is immoral, it's theft. You know, what are we talking about here? What kind of war is this? This is not defined. What kind of war is this? Now, notice here we're providing intelligence. So that would be your basic officers and your basic like CIA. What's the big thing over there? NSA. So again, Saudi Arabia is not providing this. America is providing. Let me say, America has its people on the ground and so forth. Then also targeting assistance. That means it's the satellites. It's the various different reconnaissance plane. It's all the different pieces of the people on the ground who are there probably as news reporters, but they're not really news reporters. They're just basically CIA operatives that are just there putting targets and stuff for it to be blown up. Now, when you pull back and you say to yourself, okay, refueling, logistics, intelligence, targeting assistance, okay, you're not flying the plane, you don't have troops on the ground. Isn't that almost the whole war? There's almost no part of the war that is not being led by American forces. So notice that it did not amount to American using military force. Wow, this is so powerful. Did not amount to using American military force. Now, how can you do refueling, intelligence, targeting practices, logistics, and it's not American forces? That means you must be using some private company, but no private company can do that. No, this is it's the American military. So this is the type of stuff that when we look at the national debt and we look at this rising cost, and we know that one of the things that have broke nations in the past is this. I think they say America has 130 bases or 100 and something bases around the world. And so these bases are what is being used to fight this war. It's just that American troops are not flying and pressing that button to release the bomb. American troops are not being used on the ground per se, in a sense, in a combat role. But if you're doing everything else and you just need a few good guys to pull the trigger, you're in a war. So the Yemen war is official. As I say, if the bombs and the bullets are all made in USA, and this is, I say, you can go online and see the evidence of this. It's stamped, made in USA, American flag on these things. And you look at it, it's American bombs. You're doing every part of the war except, as I say, the Saudi Arabia is pulling triggers, since they like, I guess, to do that type of stuff. They like to pull triggers. Now, look at it. McCall and others also argued that ending American targeting assistance to Saudi Arabia would only worsen civilian casualty. So it's difficult to think about this, but when you think about this, but what he's saying here, if you so let's just look about if you end. So if you don't refuel the plane, if you don't provide the plane, because the planes are American planes, the refueling is American refueling, the logistics is American, the intelligence is American, the targeting assistance is American, the bombs are American. If you decide that you're not going to do any of this, would that increase casualty or would that decrease casualty? You will decrease the amount of money that is being profited from Saudi Arabia for doing this war, for helping out with this war, but you would decrease. In other words, the Bible always say, when there is, when you take out the talebearer or the person who likes fight, the contention cease. See, two people fighting, and you go fuel the fight. And I've seen people do this, wife and husband fighting, and somebody with their mad self goes in and takes side. So now, if it takes side with the husband or it takes side with the wife, the other spouse now has to double their fight because now they have two people fighting against. So now they're overly excited to prove their point because now you know you're up against two people. Instead of saying, well, let's instead of the third person comes in and says, let's go to the negotiating table. You will not guarantee peaceful negotiation, but at least you know somebody push in the fight and say, yeah, punch him in the face. And then the person like, oh, so now I'm after there's a proxy fight going on because now the third entity is encouraging the other person to fight. So it's a proxy war. So now I'm going to fight harder to defend myself. So this is where the problem is. How can you say we're doing all of this? If you remember the war in Libya was a good example. Europe wanted to take out Gaddafi and Europe ran out of bombs. If you go back and read your history, you find out real quickly that Europe had run out of bombs. They run out of armament. They could not produce the armament was necessary fast enough. And Obama had to step in and send carriers over there and send them military hardware, the bombs, in order to blow up the rest of Gaddafi's stronghold and get him out. They ran out. They could not produce enough. The producer of all these things is the United States. So it's not that there's not war. It's that oftentimes, if you have nobody making the bullets, people are going to run out of bullets sooner or later. And probably going to have to talk to each other and negotiate. Can't guarantee. One more article. So when you see that this is why this constant state of war, the result is more debt. And if you're in war like that yourself personally, you're constantly fighting, you're going to go in a deficit. You're going to end up in a mental ward. And then somebody going to say, you're bankrupt, man. How you end up in a mental ward? The mental ward is a testament that you're bankrupt. And you'll be like, yeah, I fight so much till I'm in the mental ward. I can't fight anymore. This is mental insanity. And we're seeing it, and the way it's being shown is in the national debt. Notice again here, I'm going to take this as a quick article as an illustration of the continued problems. A Tennessee clinic, this is from USA Today again. It says a Tennessee clinic swindled the military out of $65 million. This is how they got caught. So I'm going to read a piece of this. It's a few things going on here. So Bill Snyder stood in his home office holding a package of skin cream worth more than gold. The skin cream worth $14,500. He didn't know exactly what he had stumbled on, but he was pretty sure it was illegal. In March 2015, a few weeks before Snyder, 72 years old, Kerr Majian, private investigator, had been snooping around Southern California military base when a Marine he knew mentioned he had a strange source of side income. The Marine was being paid to get medicine he didn't need. A Tennessee doctor he had never met wrote him a medicinal cream prescription, which was being filled by a pharmacy in Utah. The military covered the bill, and the Marine got a cash kickback from somebody. When the cream arrived in the mail, the Marine didn't actually use them. He was in it for the money, not for the medicine after all. Suspicious, Snyder, I think that's how it said, launched a ruse to investigate, persuading the Marines to reroute the shipments to his house. Soon, Snyder scheduled a shoebox-sized parcel that held several tubes of creams about the same size and consistency as sunscreen that was supposedly used to treat pain and scars. This medicine had been prescribed, supplied, and delivered seemingly for no reason at all. Nobody needed it. Nobody wanted it. So what was the point? After the second delivery, I realized that this was some kind of fraud. I believe there were about a dozen Marines involved, and they were being actively recruited to be prescribed this cream. It was a conspiracy, and it was growing, but I didn't know how huge. Today, court records make clear the enormity of the conspiracy. The scheme that Snyder stumbled upon in 2015 stretched from California to Tennessee, involving people and companies from at least 4 states. In Tennessee, 2 doctors and nurse practitioners have pleaded guilty to defrauding a military insurance program called TRICARE out of $65 million. At least 2 more suspects are facing charges. Federal prosecutors also are attempting to seize swaths of East Tennessee farmland, a strip mall, a large estate they argued was purchased with healthcare fraud profit. Outside Tennessee, an ex-Marine in San Diego has confessed to recruiting Marines for the scheme, and Utah Pharmacy Company is on the indictment. The company also is linked to an even larger scheme in Mississippi, where 7 people have pleaded guilty to using similar medicinal creams to defraud the federal government out of an additional $400 million. And I'll pause there, and I just mentioned again that the pain cream costs $14,500. That's why they were able to rack up that much money in just a short time. So they will pay the Marine $300 a month to get a delivery of the cream, and then the rest of the money would be theirs. They were really not giving the Marines a good cut. I guess they were greedy. So this is what happened here. So they're one group $65 million, another group they're investigating $400 million. That's $465 million. And they were using people who would be considered by society as the most patriotic, faithful to the country. But their need for $300 a month had them, what do you call it now? Their need for $300 a month had them being basically increasing the deficit. And so this is an example, as I put here. And as I say, you can go read this article. The article goes on and on, talking about it. It's the indebtedness and talking about how they did this thing, right? There's more to come because, as I said, there's a bigger group with $400 million of theft. And imagine this is happening nationwide. And again, to note, these were nurse practitioner, doctor, nurse, military people. So people you would say people who are most flag-bearing, patriotic, true Americans. People who love the country than anything else, and they were wreaking havoc on the financial system. So when you look at this and you talk about what's happening when we talk about the national debt, that most people are not talking about is these type of things that, again, it is robbing your own in order to live large. This is the type of thing that's wreaking havoc on the financial system and setting the debt, because people are supposed to be trustworthy, but they have either blood in their eyes in the sense of they want to fight wars. This constant, I want to stamp and make everybody know that I'm the biggest, toughest guy, and I'm willing to do this by basically taking the taxpayer dollar and giving it away in bombs and guns as a claim that I'm protecting the national sovereignty. But all it is just love to fight and love a war. It's like a game to them. And it doesn't matter how much people in Yemen die. What's going to happen is that we're going to win, and we're going to win at all costs, but what we're doing, we're destroying the nation, because we're taking our fellow human beings' tax dollars and blowing it, just exploding it. That money's gone. That's a loss of money. Somebody say, oh no, because the bomb makers make the money. No, they don't. That money's cursed. That would be true if there was not such a thing as a curse. That's a cursed money. And the result of the money is dead bodies and destroyed properties. There's no blessing. There's no blessing for Saudi Arabia. They're cursed too for doing this type of stuff. So if you look at this here, I'm going to read Haggai chapter 1 verse 5 and 6. Haggai chapter 1 verse 5 and 6. It says, now therefore thus says the Lord of hosts, consider your ways. Consider your ways. Ye have sown much and bring in little. Ye eat, but ye have not enough. Ye drink, but ye are not filled with drink. Ye clothe you, but there is none warm. And he that earneth wages to put it into a bag with holes. So that's where what was going on again in Israel. And that's synonymous what's going on. Because you could earn wages, but where the money's going. I don't matter how much money you make. I don't mind if you're digging the money out of the ground and buying diamonds. If you're on crack, you're just putting it in bags that has holes. If you're eating all these empty calories, you're making all that money, but you're putting it in bags that have holes. If you're going to constant wars and you're blowing up stuff all the time and killing all these innocent people, 30% or 30 something percent of all the people being hit is being hit, and it's just civilians. And you're telling me that you have such a terrible hit rate? 18,000 and 6,000 of those are just civilians being blown to bits. That's a curse. You put it into bags that have holes. That's a terrible hit rate. I can imagine some of the American military like putting their two hands in their head and just looking to the ground. So what a terrible hit rate. You every time you drop a bomb, 1 in 3 is hitting a civilian home. That's just horrible. People would have nothing to do with the war. That's just this is a disaster. You're telling me that's putting your money into bags of holes, because that curse is gonna come back to Saudi Arabia and to America. That's a terrible thing to do to people who are already living as if they're in the 1900s. They're living poor, and you're blowing up a bunch of poor people. What good can come of that? What good can come of that? I'd like an American to tell me what good's gonna come of that. People are living so poor already, and you're having a 1 in 3 is a civilian person being massacred. You're supporting that, and that's not putting your money into bags that have holes. I don't know what is. Again, the sick and aging population. You can't talk to these people about anything to do with health. At least some of them, most of them. So this is why the national debt is increasing, because you're putting money in bags that have holes. Yes, the fast food companies are doing great, but at what cost? Remember a few years ago, the tobacco manufacturers were doing phenomenal business, brisk business, but at what cost? And now, to step into the void of the tobacco industry, we now have the marijuana industry. They're doing phenomenal business, but at what cost to the American public? This is taking your money and putting it in bags of holes. You never see somebody that get up and puff smoke down their mouth. They look healthy. They look beaten up and mashed up because you're smoking. You're inhaling smoke. Nobody will go before anything that is burning and smoking and inhale it and say, man, this is good. You put the money in the bags of holes. And again, if you look at this, gold standard is not going to fix this. You're not going to fix it with gold standard, because the society spends so much money on entertainment. Sure, you go to the stadium, the coliseums across the country, and they're packed with 50 to 80 something, 90 something thousand people. And when they finish, what did they gain from that? As I said, the Super Bowl average ticket was, I think they say over $6,000 for the average ticket. On the average. The lows, 2,000 something, the highs, 10,000 or even more. And then what? They go to a game and they come over and they're out of $6,000. And then they say there's a national debt. But they're entertained. Is the entertainment mecca. There's Hollywood, there's Netflix to distribute, there's the theaters, there's the coliseums, or what they call the arenas. There's all this comedy, there's all this, everybody's giddy and laughing but broke and getting broker. Because why? Or more broke? Because, as he says here, I read again, ye have sown much but bring in little. All that GMO stuff is not working. Ye eat but ye have not enough. Empty calories. You drink, but you're not filled. You are clothed, but you're not warm. And you eat it, you earn it wages, and the wages are put into bags with holes. His money's going away. That's what's creating the debt. And on a national basis, if you do this, they will create debt. On a personal basis, if this is your lifestyle and this is how you're living, you will create plenty of debt in your life. You will always be broke and indebted. That's the reality of life. And this is why it's important for us to learn about these things and understand these things, because whatever we see the nation doing, we can look at it on a personal basis. You find out the people in the nation is doing it. If everything you have in your life is leased and borrowed, and you own nothing, you don't own anything, you're just putting money into bags that have hold. You never own anything. You never have any assets. And that's what the problem is. You can take it on a national basis, you can take it on a personal basis. Either way, the result is going to be financial indebted as a testimony that the bankruptcy, the personal bankruptcy or the national bankruptcy, is a result from bankrupt lifestyle. You live a bankrupt lifestyle, you'll end up with bankruptcy personally, socially, spiritually, financially. Let us move away from this type of lifestyle. It is only killing the individual and the nation. Let us pray. Our Father who art in heaven, we thank you again for the blessings of your word. We thank you, dear Lord, for the peace in our life that passeth assurance, that we truly, dear Lord, personally are not warmongers, and truly we don't congregate with other warmongers to go fight other nations. May you give us peace, and may we be peaceable. This is our prayer in Jesus' name. Amen. Well, thanks again for being with me on Revive Reform Radio. Looking forward again to talking to you live Friday morning, where we should talk about wisdom for living. Until then, I pray that you may continue to walk with the King.